A brass key hit Trevon Hayes's palm like a sentence. Cold, heavy, old enough to have stories inside it. The stranger who placed it there did not smile. He did not ask for thanks. He leaned in close, voice low, eyes darting as if the street itself had ears. "Your mom never missed a payment." Then he stepped back into the flow of people and disappeared like he was never there. Trevon stood on the pavement outside the convenience store, frozen, staring at the key. It was brass, worn smooth in places where fingers had held it for years. A tiny metal tag was looped through the head. An address was stamped into it, not a street name he recognized, not in his neighborhood now. But something in his chest shifted anyway, like a memory trying to wake up. Because Trevon knew his mom. Yvette Hayes was not late, not with bills, not with rent, not with anything that could risk her child. His whole life she had been the woman who ironed uniforms at midnight so the next day could start clean. The woman who counted cash at the kitchen table and still found a way to buy his school shoes without complaining. So when she called him 3 weeks ago, crying so hard she could barely speak, and said, "They took it, Trev. They took our house," it felt like the world had cracked. She told him it was late fees. She told him the lender said she missed payments. She told him the county said the paperwork was final. She told him she was tired, and Trevon, standing in his small flat with the phone pressed tight to his ear, felt something burn through him that he had not felt since he was a teenager, getting searched outside a shop for no reason. The same message, dressed in new words. "You do not own safety here." Now he stared at this key and felt that burning again. He turned it over. The tag didn't just have an address. It also had 3 tiny letters scratched underneath, faint but deliberate. H.F. Trevon did not know what they meant, but he knew this was not random. He looked up and scanned the street, but the stranger was gone. A bus hissed at the stop. A child laughed. Someone shouted into a phone. Life kept moving. Trevon's hands did not. He slid the key into his pocket like it could vanish if he blinked. Then he walked to his car and sat inside without starting it. He stared at the steering wheel. He tried to breathe. Then he called his mom. She answered on the 3rd ring, voice small, like she was trying to take up less space in the world. "Hello?" "Mom," Trevon said, "I need you to listen. I'm coming to you today." There was a pause. "Trevon, baby, I told you it's done." "It's not done." Another pause, longer this time, like her hope was afraid to step forward and get hurt again. "What happened?" Trevon swallowed. "Someone handed me a key, an old brass key, with an address on it, and he said you never missed a payment." Silence. Then, so quiet Trevon almost thought the call had dropped, Yvette whispered, "Where are you?" "In my car." "Come here," she said. "Now." He drove to her place, the small rented room she'd been forced into after losing the home. It was temporary housing in a building that smelled like bleach and resignation, the kind of place where doors shut softly because no one wanted to make noise and attract attention. He knocked. She opened the door before the second knock, like she had been standing right behind it. Yvette Hayes looked older than 3 weeks could explain. Her hair was wrapped, neat as always, but her eyes were bruised with exhaustion. She wore a cardigan even though the room was warm. She saw his face and tried to straighten, tried to be the mum who had answers. But her chin trembled. Trevon stepped inside and hugged her without speaking. He held her longer than usual. She held him back, tight. When they separated, she searched his eyes. "Show me," she said. He pulled the key out and placed it in her palm. Yvette stared at it. Her thumb brushed the tag, the address, the scratched letters, and her face changed, not fear, not surprise, recognition. She sank onto the edge of the bed like her knees gave up without permission. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "A man, outside the shop on Linden." Yvette's breath caught. She stared at the letters again. "H.F.," she whispered. Trevon crouched in front of her. "What does that mean?" Yvette shook her head slowly. It means somebody remembers." Trevon waited. Yvette swallowed. Her voice came out like it had been stored in a locked box for years. HF is the name I used when I first bought the house, before I changed it back after the divorce. Trevon blinked. What? She nodded, eyes glossy. Hayes Freeman, that was my name then. I changed it back later, but the first deed, the first insurance, the first everything, it was HF. Trevon felt his skin tighten. So whoever gave you this, she whispered. They know. They know it was mine. Trevon stood up slowly, heart thudding. Mum, he said, voice steady. Tell me everything, from the start. No protecting me. No, it's fine. Everything. Yvette hesitated. Then she nodded, and she told him. She told him about the lender that knocked in a polite suit and spoke in sugar. She told him about the refinance offer that was supposed to lower payments and give breathing room. She told him about the forms that came in the post with confusing language and deadlines that always felt too short. She told him about the late fees that appeared, even when she was sure she paid on time. She told him about calling and being put on hold for hours. She told him about being spoken to like she was lying. She told him about going to the county office with receipts and being told the file was missing. She told him about the day the notice came, stamped final, and her hands shook so bad she dropped it on the kitchen floor. She told him about the shame, the way she stopped telling friends, the way she kept saying, I should have known better, like the crime was being hopeful. When she finished, Trevon sat in silence. Then he said, Mom, you did not lose that house to late fees. She looked at him helpless. They said I did. Trevon leaned forward. No, they took it. The words landed in the room like a door slamming. Yvette's eyes filled. Trevon reached for her hand again. We're getting it back, he said. Not just for you, for everyone. Yvette shook her head immediately, panic rising. Trevon, baby, please. Those people, they have power. I don't want you mixed up in it. Trevon's jaw tightened. I'm already mixed up. They took my mum's home. That is me. He held up the key. And now someone just handed me a doorway back in. He stood. Tell me that address, he said. Say it out loud. Yvette read the tag, her voice trembling as she spoke each part. It was across town, a quiet street near old trees and cracked pavements, not far from where Trevon grew up, not far from where the house used to be. Trevon nodded. All right, he said. We go. Yvette grabbed his wrist. What if it's a trap? Trevon looked at her. Then we don't walk into it blind. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. First, he called his friend Nia Jacobs, a reporter who used to sit behind him in high school and now worked for a local investigative outlet that survived on stubbornness and donated coffee. Nia answered like she was running. Trevon, you all right? No, he said, but I'm about to be. I need you to meet me in an hour. I've got something. What kind of something? The kind that smells like a scheme. A beat. Nia's voice sharpened. Send location. Next, Trevon called an older man he trusted, an attorney named Lionel Briggs who had once helped a church fight a zoning dispute, and one with nothing but receipts and a calm voice. Lionel answered in a slow, steady tone. Trevon Hayes. Haven't heard from you in a while. I need you, Trevon said. It's my mum's house. I think it was stolen. A pause. Stolen how? Paperwork, fees, county office, a lender that smells dirty. Another pause. Then Lionel sighed like he'd heard this story before and hated that he had. Give me the name of the lender, Lionel said. Yvette, listening, whispered it. Arden Crown Lending. Trevon repeated it. Lionel went quiet for a moment. All right, Lionel said finally. Come to my office first. Do not go alone to any address. Bring every document your mum has, every letter, every receipt, every envelope, even the junk. Trevon looked at the key in his hand. We have a key, he said. A physical key. With an address. Lionel's voice changed. A key? Yes. Bring that too, Lionel said. And Trevon, do not tell anyone else yet. Not until we know what we're dealing with. Trevon said, "Understood." He ended the call. Yvette watched him with fear and hope fighting on her face. Trevon put his hand on her shoulder. "Get your paperwork," he said gently. "We're doing this properly." They gathered what they could: a folder with worn edges, loose receipts in an envelope, a printout of bank statements, letters stamped urgent, and one thing that made Trevon's throat tighten: a photo, the house, the porch. Yvette standing beside a younger Trevon, both of them smiling wide, sunlight catching their faces. Trevon stared at it for a long moment. Then he slid it into the folder carefully, like it was evidence, because it was. At Lionel Briggs's office, the air smelled like paper and patience. The waiting room had old chairs and a vase with plastic flowers that had seen too much life. Lionel came out himself, tall and gray, eyes sharp behind glasses. He shook Trevon's hand, then hugged Yvette like he knew what she needed more than formalities. They sat in his small office while a ceiling fan turned slowly overhead. Lionel laid out the documents on the desk. He read without speaking for several minutes. His face grew tighter with each page. When he finally looked up, his voice was careful. "Yvette," he said, "did you ever receive a notice of default that listed the exact missed payments?" She shook her head. "They sent notices, but it always said I was behind in general. Every time I asked for details, they said it would come." Lionel nodded slowly. "And you went to the county office?" "Yes," she said, "2 times. "Who did you speak to?" Yvette hesitated. "I don't know, a clerk, a man. He was polite, like he was bored." Lionel wrote something down. Trevon pulled out the key and placed it on the desk. Lionel picked it up and turned it over. He squinted at the tag. "Hayes Freeman," he murmured. Trevon's eyes widened. "You can tell?" Lionel nodded. "That's not a random scratch. That's personal. This key is tied to your mom's original name. That means someone involved had access to the early records." Yvette's hands shook. "So what does that mean?" Lionel set the key down gently. "It means," Lionel said, "there is a trail, and someone wants you to find it." A knock came at the door. Lionel's assistant popped her head in. "Mr. Briggs, there's a reporter asking for Trevon Hayes." Trevon looked at Yvette. "That's Nia." Lionel nodded once. "Bring her in." Nia Jacobs walked in with her hair pulled back, notebook already open, eyes scanning the room like she could smell truth. She stopped when she saw Yvette. Her face softened. "Ms. Hayes." Yvette gave a small nod, wary. Nia turned to Trevon. "What is it?" Trevon pushed the key forward. Nia stared at it. Then he told her the stranger's words. He watched Nia's expression shift from curiosity to anger to focus, like a camera lens sharpening. Lionel spoke. "Before anything goes public, we need to verify the chain of title in the foreclosure process. We need names, documents, proof." Nia nodded quickly. "I can help with public records requests. Sometimes you can find patterns. Same lender, same notary, same officials." Trevon leaned forward. "Patterns like targeting black homeowners." Nia's eyes held his. "Exactly like that." Yvette's voice cracked. "But why would they do this?" Lionel answered, calm and brutal. "Because houses are money, and people like your mom are treated like opportunities." Trevon felt his chest tighten. Lionel continued. "There is a scheme I have seen before. Predatory lenders push confusing agreements, then create late fees, then accelerate the process. Meanwhile, someone at the county office helps with speed and silence. The property gets flipped cheap, then sold high." Yvette whispered, "And no one stops them?" Nia's jaw clenched. "People try, but the story gets buried unless it comes with proof that cannot be ignored." Trevon picked up the key. "We're getting that proof," he said. Lionel nodded. "The address on that key. We go there, but not like a movie. We go smart. We document. We stay within the law. We bring witnesses." Nia lifted her phone. "I can record everything." Lionel held up a hand. "Only in public spaces. Be mindful. We do not want to compromise this." Trevon looked at Yvette. "Mom, are you ready?" She looked terrified. Then she nodded. I'm tired of being scared, she said softly. I'm tired of feeling like I deserved it. Trevon squeezed her hand. Let's go, he said. They drove together, Trevon behind the wheel, Yvette in the passenger seat, Nia in the back, Lionel following in his own car. The street on the quay was quieter than Trevon expected. Old houses, lawns that needed mowing, a dog barking somewhere behind a fence. They pulled up near the address. It was not a house. It was a small storage facility, rows of metal doors, security cameras, a sign that said, Office. Trevon's stomach sank. Yvette stared. This is what the key is for. Lionel parked behind them and walked up. He looked at the sign, then at the key tag. Could be, he said. Could be a unit number inside. Nia's eyes glittered. This is either evidence or a dead end. Trevon got out. His shoes hit the gravel. The air smelled like hot asphalt. He walked towards the office with the key in his pocket, every nerve awake. Inside, a woman at the desk looked up. Can I help you? Trevon kept his voice steady. I'm looking for a unit. I have a key. It's labeled with this address. The woman's eyes flicked to the key. For a fraction of a second, something passed over her face. Recognition. Then she masked it. Do you have ID? She asked. Trevon handed it over. She typed his name into a computer. Her brow furrowed. Hayes, she repeated softly. Lionel stepped forward. We're trying to confirm whether a unit is registered under Yvette Hayes Freeman. The woman's fingers paused. Nia, standing slightly to the side, watched like she was memorizing every twitch. The woman swallowed. I can't give out information without authorization, she said. Trevon took a breath. We're not asking for someone else's unit. We're asking for hers. The woman hesitated. Then she stood. I'm going to speak to my manager, she said. She disappeared through a door behind the desk. Trevon felt his pulse in his throat. Yvette's hand found his arm. Trevon. I'm here, he whispered back. I've got you. A minute passed. Then two. Then a man came out wearing a polo shirt with the facility logo. He smiled too wide. How can I help? Lionel introduced himself calmly. The man looked at Lionel, then at Yvette, then at Trevon. Hayes, he said. That's a familiar name. Trevon didn't like the way he said it. Is there a unit? Trevon asked. The man sighed theatrically, as if this was inconvenient. We have privacy policies, he said. We can't just... Lionel interrupted politely. We are not requesting the contents of any unit. We are asking whether there exists a unit assigned to Yvette Hayes Freeman. If it does, we can prove identity, and we have the physical key. The man's smile tightened. Let me check, he said. He went back to the computer. Trevon watched him type, watched his shoulders stiffen, watched him glance at the woman behind the desk. Then the man cleared his throat. There is a unit, he said slowly, but it's marked inactive. It's been unpaid for a long time. Yvette's face paled. Unpaid, Lionel leaned in. Inactive does not mean non-existent. The man's smile flickered. It's locked for delinquency. Trevon pulled the key out. This key fits something. The man's eyes dropped to the key. His throat moved as he swallowed. Lionel's voice stayed calm, but his words sharpened. We would like to view the unit in your presence. If this is truly delinquency, you can show us the paperwork and the lock. The man hesitated. Nia scribbled in her notebook, eyes never leaving his face. Finally, the man nodded once. Fine, but you can't take anything. You can't record inside. Lionel said, Understood. They walked out into the rows of units. The sun was bright. The shadows were hard. They passed doors with numbers stenciled on them. The man led them to the far end, where the air felt slightly cooler, where fewer people walked. He stopped at a unit door and pointed. Unit 114. There was a padlock on it, old, rusted. The man said, See? Locked. Trevon held up the key. His hand shook slightly as he stepped forward. He slid the key into the lock. It turned, smoothly. like it had been waiting. The man's face tightened. Yvette gasped softly, hand flying to her mouth. Trevon pulled the lock off. He looked at Lionel. Lionel nodded once. Trevon lifted the door. Metal rattled as it rose. The smell hit first. Dust, paper, old wood. Inside, stacked neatly against one wall, were boxes. Not random storage, labeled boxes. Some marked with dates, some marked with words that made Trevon's stomach drop. Hayes home. Tax, mortgage, county, photos. Yvette made a sound, half sob, half laugh, like pain and relief collided. "That's mine," she whispered. "That's my handwriting." Trevon stepped inside slowly. Nia leaned forward but stayed at the threshold. Lionel stood beside the manager, watching him like a hawk. Trevon picked up the top file from the nearest box. It was a manila folder. Inside were copies of documents, receipts, payment confirmations, and then something that made his breath catch. A stamped county record with a date, a signature, and a note in the margin. Fee applied despite receipt. Proceed. Trevon's eyes narrowed. He flipped through more. There were notices with wrong dates. There were letters addressed to the wrong spelling of Yvette's name. There were copies of payment slips that matched her bank statements. She had paid. She had paid again. And again. Then he found another folder. The words on the front were written in neat, careful letters. "Do not lose this." Inside was a printout of an email chain. Trevon read the first line and felt his blood turn cold. It was from Arden Crown Lending to someone with a county email address. Subject line: Expedite Hayes Freeman file. Trevon's hands tightened around the paper. He looked up at Lionel. Lionel stepped closer, eyes scanning. His face hardened. "This," Lionel said quietly, "is the spine of the case." Yvette stood behind Trevon, trembling. "They knew," she whispered. "They knew I paid." Nia's voice came out soft, furious. "They didn't care." Trevon flipped to the next page. Another email, another name, a county official, Deputy Clerk Lyle Barrett, and another name on Arden Crown's side, a woman named Marissa Klein. The email contained one line that felt like a punch. "Same approach as last quarter's batch." Batch. Like they were talking about objects, not families. Trevon felt something in him go still. The manager cleared his throat. That's not supposed to be here." Lionel turned to him. "Then explain how it is." The manager's mouth opened and closed. He had no answer. Trevon looked around the unit again, at the boxes, at the organized evidence, at the fact that someone had kept this safe, hidden, waiting. He realized something. "This unit wasn't delinquent," he said slowly. "You told us it was locked for unpaid fees." The manager's face flushed. "That's what the system says." Lionel's voice sharpened. "And who updates the system?" The manager didn't answer. Nia stepped slightly closer, voice steady. "Who told you to keep this unit marked inactive?" The manager's eyes darted. Trevon watched him crack in real time. A man used to following instructions, now realizing the instructions were about to burn him too. Lionel said, calm but firm, "You're standing at a crossroads. If you cooperate, you can protect yourself. If you lie, you become part of it." The manager's shoulders slumped. He exhaled. "I didn't open it," he whispered. "I never opened it. They told me it was legal. They said it was storage from a foreclosure. They said not to touch it." "Who?" Lionel asked. The manager swallowed. He looked at the office building like it might save him. Then he said quietly, "A man from the county. He came with paperwork. He had a badge. Lyle Barrett." Yvette's breath hitched. Trevon's knuckles whitened. Lionel nodded once. "Thank you." Nia wrote it down, eyes fierce. Trevon stared at the boxes and felt a strange mix of gratitude and rage. Somebody had stored the truth. Somebody had been brave enough to keep it alive, or guilty enough, or both. Trevon carefully placed the email chain back into the folder. Lionel held up a hand. "We do not remove anything today. Not yet. We document. We file motions. We do this clean so they cannot claim theft or tampering." Trevon nodded slowly, forcing himself to breathe through the urge to grab every box and run. Nia whispered, "This is huge." Trevon looked at his mom. Yvette's eyes were wet, but there was something new in them, a flicker, a return. "I told you," Trevon said softly. "You didn't miss." Yvette pressed her hand to her chest like she was holding herself together. "I thought I was losing my mind," she whispered. "I thought maybe I did." Trevon shook his head. "No. They made you doubt yourself so you'd go quiet." Lionel closed the unit door gently. He locked it again. Then he turned to the manager. "We will be requesting official access through the court. If anything in this unit disappears, you understand what that means." The manager nodded quickly, sweat on his forehead. "I understand." They walked back to the office. The sky seemed too blue for what Trevon had just seen. In the car, Nia turned to Trevon. "This isn't just your mum," she said. "That email said batch. If we pull county records, we might find dozens, hundreds." Trevon stared ahead. "Then we pull them." Lionel spoke from his car window, parked beside them. "We move fast but not reckless. I will file for an injunction. We will request the full file from the county, plus communications with Arden Crown. Nia can work the public angle when we have the first legal foothold." Yvette whispered, "Will they come after us?" Lionel's eyes softened. "They might try intimidation. That's why we do everything in daylight, together, with paper trails." Trevon nodded. As they drove away, Trevon's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A man's voice, low, controlled. "You found the key," the voice said. Trevon's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Who is this?" he asked. The voice paused like it was measuring him. "Someone who should have spoken sooner," the man said. "Someone who watched them do it and told himself it wasn't his business." Trevon's chest tightened. The voice continued, quieter now. "They took your mum's house. They took mine too, in a different way. But I kept my mouth shut because I was scared, because I didn't want trouble, because I thought silence was safer." Trevon's jaw clenched. "Where are you?" "Not far," the man said. "And I have more than a key. I have proof, real proof. You need to meet me." Lionel, in the passenger seat of his own car behind them, couldn't hear this, but Trevon lifted a hand to signal he needed a moment. Trevon kept his voice calm. "What's your name?" A pause. Then, "Connor Reed." Trevon felt the name tug at memory. Reed. White neighbor. Same street. The man who used to wave from his porch sometimes. The man who stood in his driveway years ago when a county truck came and posted notices on doors. Trevon remembered his mum standing on the porch, confused, holding papers. He remembered Connor Reed watching and doing nothing. Trevon's voice went cold. "You live on Rosewood." Connor exhaled like that hurt. "Yes. You watched," Trevon said. "You watched what happened to my mum." Connor's voice cracked slightly. "I did. And I'm sorry." Trevon felt anger rise, hot and sharp. "Sorry doesn't give us our home back." "I know," Connor said. "That's why I'm calling now." Trevon stared at the road. He thought of his mum's hands shaking. He thought of the word batch. He thought of the unit full of proof. He thought of how silence had protected the wrong people for years. "Where do we meet?" Trevon asked. Connor gave an address, a small diner on the edge of town, public, busy, daylight. Trevon felt Lionel would approve. "An hour," Connor said. "Please, before I lose my nerve." Trevon's voice stayed flat. "You should have had nerve years ago," Connor whispered. "I know." The call ended. Trevon pulled over briefly and called Lionel, putting him on speaker with Nia and Yvette listening. "There's someone," Trevon said. "Connor Reed, white neighbor from our old street. He says he has proof and he stayed silent because he was scared." Lionel's voice sharpened. "He contacted you directly?" "Yes." "What did he offer?" "Proof. Wants to meet in public." Lionel was quiet for a moment. Then, "All right, we go together." "Nia, You take notes, but do not inflame the situation. Yvette, you do not have to speak unless you want to. Yvette's voice came out steady. I want to look him in the eye. Trevon felt pride and pain twist together. They met at the diner. It smelled like frying oil and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Connor Reed sat in a corner booth, shoulders hunched, hands clasped like he was praying for forgiveness. He looked older than Trevon remembered. His hair had more gray. His face had that worn look of a man who had carried guilt like a stone for too long. When Trevon walked in, Connor stood immediately. He opened his mouth. Trevon held up a hand. Sit, Trevon said. Connor sat. Yvette slid into the booth opposite him without flinching. Her eyes were steady. Lionel sat beside Trevon. Nia sat slightly angled, notebook ready, but quiet. Connor swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he said again, like it was the only language he had left. Yvette stared at him. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake thinking I ruined my son's future? Connor's eyes filled. Yes. Yvette's voice rose slightly, but she stayed controlled. No, you don't. You don't know what it is to have your whole life reduced to a stamp and a signature and somebody telling you your memories are wrong. Connor nodded quickly, tears slipping. You're right. I don't. Trevon leaned forward. So why now? Connor's hands shook as he reached into his bag. He pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were photocopies, photos, and a small flash drive. Connor placed them on the table like he was laying down weapons. I worked for the city, Connor said, voice low. In maintenance contracts, I wasn't important. But I heard things. I saw patterns. Lionel's eyes narrowed. What patterns? Connor swallowed. Arden Crown would buy foreclosed properties through shell companies. Same names, same lawyers, same notary. And the county office, certain files moved faster than others. Certain people got mistakes that always hurt them. Yvette's mouth tightened. And you watched it happen to us. Connor nodded, shame spilling. I saw your notice. I saw you standing on the porch with papers. I saw you go to the county office. I saw you come back looking smaller. Yvette's eyes flashed. And you did nothing, Connor whispered. I told myself you'd figure it out. I told myself it wasn't my place. I told myself if I spoke, they'd come for me too. Trevon's voice was steel. So you protected yourself? Connor nodded, tears falling. Yes. Nia's pen scratched quickly. Lionel stayed calm. What is on the flash drive? Connor took a shaky breath. Emails, screenshots, a recorded phone call, and something else. He reached into the envelope and pulled out a single document, a copy of a county ledger entry, with an annotation and a signature. Deputy Clerk Lyle Barrett. Lionel's face hardened as he read. This is direct, Lionel murmured. Connor's voice trembled. I kept copies. I told myself I might need them one day. I didn't know when. I didn't know who. But I couldn't throw them away. Trevon stared at Connor. You didn't speak, Trevon said slowly. But you kept the knife that cut us. Connor flinched. Yvette's voice softened slightly, still wounded. Why did you hand him the key? Connor wiped his eyes. Because I was tired. Because I watched another family get pushed out last month. Because I saw the moving truck and the little boy carrying a pillow, and I realized this never ended. Because my silence didn't keep me safe. It just made me complicit. Trevon didn't speak for a moment. Then he said, You want redemption? Connor nodded, desperate. Yes. Trevon leaned in. Then you do it publicly. You don't just give us papers and hide again. Connor swallowed hard. I will. Lionel's voice was steady. That means affidavits, statements, testimony if needed. Connor nodded. I'll do it. Nia lifted her eyes. You understand this will blow up. Your name will be attached. Connor's jaw tightened. Good. It should be. Yvette stared at him for a long moment, then she spoke quietly. I don't forgive you yet, she said. But if you help expose them, you will at least stop being part of what hurt us. Connor nodded, tears falling again. That's all I want. They left the diner with a plan. Lionel would file emergency motions to preserve evidence, compel records, and challenge the foreclosure. Nia would begin building a story, but only once they had verified the data and could protect Yvette from being painted as careless. Connor would sign a sworn statement and provide his materials officially. Trevon would do what Trevon did best. He would not let it go. Over the next weeks, Trevon watched how power moved when threatened. The county office suddenly found files that had been missing. Arden Crown's representatives began calling Lionel, polite at first, then sharper. A private number started leaving voicemails on Trevon's phone. Not threats exactly, just warnings dressed as concern. "This is stressful, Mr. Hayes. You should let professionals handle it." He deleted them. Yvette began sleeping again in fragments, but she smiled more, like the truth was feeding her. Nia spent nights at her laptop mapping patterns. Same lender, same notary stamp, same shell company. Sable Ridge Holdings, Silver Pine Investments, Redwood Urban Renewal. Different names, same addresses, same lawyers, and always the victims clustered in the same zip codes. Black neighborhoods, older homeowners, people who did not have time to fight. One afternoon, Lionel called them all into his office again. His face was grim, but his eyes were bright. "We have enough," Lionel said. "Not just for Yvette's case, enough to trigger an investigation." Nia leaned forward. "How citywide?" Lionel tapped the paper. "At least 40 properties in 2 years tied to the same network, possibly more." Yvette's hand flew to her mouth. 40? Trevon's jaw clenched. "Batch." Lionel nodded. "Yes." Connor Reed came in wearing a clean shirt, looking like he hadn't slept. He sat down and slid a signed affidavit across the desk. "I did it," he said. "I'm in." Lionel looked at him. "Once we file, there is no quiet exit." Connor swallowed. "Good." Nia's voice was calm, but her eyes were fierce. "I'm going to ask you a question that people will ask. Why didn't you speak when it was happening?" Connor's shoulders dropped. "Because I believed the lie that it wasn't my problem." Trevon stared at him. Connor continued, voice rough. "Because I thought safety was staying neutral. Because I didn't want to be the guy causing trouble. And because, if I'm honest, part of me thought those families would just disappear quietly." The words hung in the room. Yvette's eyes filled again, but she did not look away. Connor's voice cracked. "And then I realized that quiet disappearing is what makes it easy. It's what makes it repeat." Trevon spoke, voice low. "Say that again when the cameras are on." Connor nodded. "I will." The day the story broke, it hit like a storm. Nia's outlet published the investigation with documents attached, not just claims, proof, emails, patterns, names. The headline didn't use soft language. It called it what it was: a predatory scheme targeting black homeowners, aided by a county official, designed to flip properties for profit. The city could not ignore it. People shared it, commented, tagged officials, tagged news stations. Older residents began coming forward with their own folders, their own receipts, their own years of being told they were wrong. And then the pressure hit the county office. Deputy Clerk Lyle Barrett did not show up to work. Rumors flew. A statement came out, bland and defensive. Lionel laughed when he read it. "That's not a denial," he said. "That's fear." A week later, a formal investigation was announced. Arden Crown's offices were served warrants. Shell companies were traced. Notaries were questioned. And Trevon sat with his mom at Lionel's office when the judge's order came through. The foreclosure was vacated. The deed was to be restored pending further review. Yvette gripped the paper like she might dissolve if she relaxed. Trevon watched her lips move silently as she read the words again and again. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "We got it back," she whispered. Trevon nodded, throat tight. "We got it back." Yvette exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. Then she started crying, quietly, shoulders shaking. Trevon wrapped his arms around her, holding her the way she had held him when he was small. Lionel stood nearby, letting the moment exist without interruption. Naya wiped at her own eyes, pretending it was just dust. Connor Reed stood in the doorway, hands clasped, face pale. He looked like a man watching a miracle he did not deserve. Yvette pulled back from Trevon, wiped her cheeks, and looked at Connor. She walked over slowly. Connor's breath caught. Yvette stopped in front of him. "You don't get to walk away clean," she said. Connor nodded, eyes wet. "I know. But you will walk away changed," she continued, "and you will spend the rest of your life speaking when it matters." Connor's lips trembled. "I will." Yvette nodded once. Then she turned back to Trevon, and in her eyes was something Trevon had not seen in a long time. A future. They went to the house the next day, not to move in yet, just to stand. The house looked smaller than Trevon remembered, but that was what time did. The porch steps creaked under his feet. The door had been changed, new lock, new paint, new numbers, like someone tried to erase history with a fresh coat. Yvette stood in the yard, staring at the windows. Her hands clenched and unclenched. Trevon pulled out the brass key. He held it up. "It doesn't fit anymore," he said. Yvette's voice was steady. "It doesn't have to. It opened the truth." Trevon nodded. They stood there in silence, listening to the neighborhood. A car passing, a dog barking, wind moving through trees, ordinary sounds. But now they sounded like something else. They sounded like home. In the weeks that followed, more names fell. More deals unraveled. More people came forward. Some were brave, some were late. But the story kept moving, because the proof was too solid to bury. And Trevon realized something that surprised him. Getting the deed back was not the end. It was the beginning of a new kind of responsibility. Because once you see the machinery, you cannot unsee it. Once you know what they do in the dark, you cannot go back to pretending the shadows are harmless. One evening, after another meeting with Lionel, Trevon sat with Yvette on her temporary bed again. The same room, the same walls, but not the same feeling. Yvette sipped tea, shoulders finely unclenched. Trevon stared at his hands. "I keep thinking about all those other families," he said. Yvette nodded slowly. "Me too." Trevon's voice was quiet. "What if we hadn't gotten the key?" Yvette looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Then we would have survived anyway. But survival isn't the same as justice." Trevon nodded. Yvette's gaze softened. "You did this, Trevon. You refused to let them rewrite reality." Trevon shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." Yvette's eyes flicked to the corner where the folder of evidence now sat like a sacred object. She whispered, "Connor Reed could have taken that to his grave." Trevon's voice was low. "He almost did." Yvette nodded. "That's why this matters. Silence is how they win." Trevon leaned back, staring at the ceiling, and that's when his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. No introduction, no greeting, just a photo. A blurred image of a metal box, a safety deposit box, stamped with a number, and beneath it, 4 words. "You only found one." Trevon's breath caught. Yvette noticed immediately. "What is it?" Trevon stared at the screen, heart pounding. He didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, even with the deed back, even with the investigation underway, even with the city finally forced to look, somebody was telling him the scheme was bigger, and somebody was still watching. Trevon locked his phone. He looked at his mom. He forced his voice steady. "It's nothing," he lied gently, because he did not want fear to re-enter her bones. But inside, he felt that familiar burning again. Not panic, purpose. Because if they only found one, that meant there were more. And Trevon Hayes did not chase justice halfway. If you're watching this and you've ever had someone try to convince you that what you lived through wasn't real, that your receipts don't matter, that your memory can be stamped away, drop in the comments where you're watching from and tell me this. Have you ever had to fight to prove something you already knew was true? And if you believe in dignity, fairness, and real accountability, hit like, subscribe, and stay with this story. Because the truth does not stay buried when enough people refuse to look away. Here's the lesson Trevon learned the hard way. Predators do not only steal property, they steal confidence, they steal sleep, they steal your voice. They rely on you being too tired to fight and too ashamed to speak. But the moment you keep your receipts, the moment you tell the story, the moment you stand in daylight with proof in your hands, their power starts to crack. And when that crack appears, you push. Not with rage alone, with patience, with evidence, with witnesses, with community. Because justice is not just a moment where you win. It is a habit you refuse to break. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember this, a house is wood and nails, but a home is dignity. And nobody gets to take that without being exposed. This story is fictional and created for storytelling and awareness. It does not depict real people or specific real cases. It is not legal advice, and it is not intended to encourage harmful behavior. This is an original story written to entertain and highlight themes of accountability. Any resemblance to real events is coincidental. If you want a part 2, tell me in the comments what you think that safety deposit box number leads to and who you think sent that message.